This conference
main-
will now be recorded.
Our main speaker for the day is the inimitable Eric Schrago. And so unless there's other business, Eric, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, John. So now that we've been called to order, what do we move for public comment? Not hearing any. That takes us to the minutes and approving the minutes of the prior meeting.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I believe I wasn't present at the last meeting, so I cannot.
Well, you can second the motion even though you
Okay.
may sustain.
Second motion.
So, all right, under discussion. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Disapprove, nay.
I'm
And
abstaining.
abstentions?
This is Binu. I'm abstaining.
All right. Well, so the minutes carry. So then here we are with Eric, the
All right.
2023 comprehensive plan.
Okay, so I'll start off by just kind of refreshing everybody as to where we are in our annual budget process. So at our last meeting on May 11th, we went through proposed targets and we talked through revenues. Today, we're going to talk through the annual staffing plan and through expenses. And then next week, we'll have our final BONC meeting. We'll talk through the consolidated budget, the overall investments that we're making. We'll go through the strategic partners and we'll look for the committee to make a recommendation to the board ahead of the meeting the following week. Any questions about timelines or plan? All right, so just to recap for last week's meeting, we walked through the financing programs and the incentive programs targets in terms of numbers of projects, the capital that we're putting out there, and the capacity that we're hoping to have installed. You see here, as an organization, our aim is for no fewer than 2,342 projects for $99 million of capital deployed and for about 15 megawatts of capacity installed. And overall, as we walked through last meeting, these are smaller overall targets because we don't have the RCIP. We aren't doing a capacity target on CPACE, but we are still being as aggressive as we were in terms of numbers and the capital associated with that. And these numbers do include the targets for the Energy Storage Solutions Program and are inclusive of those that were approved and set by PURA. Any questions here? All right, hearing none, I'll move on to the new stuff. So
Eric, I had one question back to
Sure.
the last chart. It was, I forget how many megawatts, 15 something megawatts?
15.2, I believe.
So what's the price per megawatt and how does that compare to, the normal world?
I don't have a good straightforward answer for you, John. And the reason is, like, I could do the simple math of the close to $100 million and divide the 15.2 or 15.4 rather by that. That's not going to give you a really appropriate price per megawatt, because we have a bunch of projects that are going to yield capacity here, but they aren't being included, and that goes back to CPACE and a decision that we made this year. That basically the way that we were doing targets, because we don't have a good way to estimate before we're looking at a project what the energy savings is going to be. So we haven't ever come up with a MMBTU target around that.
Right.
And so we were only putting out solar capacity targets and overlooking energy efficiency. So staff tended to chase solar a little bit more than efficiency. And we figure by not having that target and being a little bit more agnostic, it allows us to, it encourages staff to pursue both efficiency and solar on the CPACE side. We're also mixing technologies here. So in the past, when we've talked about capacity installed, that's really only been solar generation capacity. Occasionally, we've had some mixes with other generation capacity, so around some of the hydroelectric projects we've done. Here, we're also including battery storage capacity, or battery storage nameplate. So it's not apples to apples, and this is something that I really wanted to get resolved before we came to BNO this year, and then just we just didn't have the capacity to do it, and it's high on my list to do after we get the budget done and dusted. But to start looking at how are we aggregating and doing targets from a capacity sake. That it's good to have one roll-up number for the organization, but I think we need a little bit better translation from one thing to another before we do that, and we need to have a way to, or a better way to include efficiency in this.
But I guess at least the sense of the bank is that we're not paying wildly over some market rate per megawatt. Would you say that's a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. If we're doing that, then we're not doing our jobs in terms of driving that market to provide.
Well, that's what I wondered. Yeah. Okay.
No, we're paying market rates for our projects.
All right. Thank you.
So is it okay if I move to the staffing plan? Yeah. So staffing plan, we have, in terms of existing staff, we're carrying over 35 headcount from year to year, no changes. That these are all positions that were in last year's staffing plan. We have some employees that were hired over this past year, 7 that were hired to fill open positions positions that were open at this point in last year's staffing plan. So nothing drastic to report there. The big changes you're going to see are on this slide, and that's where we have some open positions now. And so these are vacancies. So these are positions that were previously approved that are presently open. We have our director for environmental infrastructure, and that hasn't been filled because we really haven't. I think Brian has still been working on the position description. I believe that is coming back to the board or coming to the board for approval. I don't think that's been approved yet. We just haven't been at a place where we felt comfortable filling that. I think doing that baseline research and the listening tour that he's been on has really helped inform what those needs are going to be, as did the strategic retreat last month. The next position on here is for financing programs. This is a backfill for Nicholas Zuba, who left us at the start of last fiscal year. We've had that position open We're close to filling it, but I don't believe it's actually going to be filled by the end of this fiscal year. So I think we're close. We'll get there shortly. We have a senior accountant position that is an additional position we're adding right now. That's to support Jane's team. The thing about environmental infrastructure is it's going to add some work from an accounting perspective due to how we need to keep track of how we're paying for it. And so we're going to need an accountant to help with that, but also just make sure that we have all the controls in place that Jane and Dan and Sean and the rest of that team have put in place. So I think they'll be happy to have some breathing room there. The next position is an asset manager. And this is a position that we've been working on setting up. We have tried to deal with it in a couple different ways, and we're close to filling it at the moment. I don't think we'll have it filled by the end of this fiscal year. I think we'll have it filled at the beginning of next. This is somebody to look after all the systems that are generating revenue in some way, shape, or form to us. We currently have this responsibility split up amongst a lot of different individuals. We have one person who is pretty much full-time looking at a subset of these systems, but this would be in addition to that. And as we've seen a dip in performance on the RSIP fleet, we recognize the importance of this even more. You'll hear me today talk about expenses around asset management, O&M, and just we've seen this year the need to really do that. We saw a dip in performance. We've seen issues with connectivity. We've seen issues with the meter replacement that I'm sure you're all aware of. And so having somebody who's looking at this in more of a proactive role as opposed to a reactive role, I think would benefit us greatly. So that's the intent there. The next position is a new position related to environmental outreach. This is to bolster some of the community engagement that we have been doing, but we're going to need to do more of as part of the rollout of environmental infrastructure. I think for those of you that were at the strategic retreat who were participating in the session that Ashley took us through in terms of bringing communities along with us, this is really what this position is designed to do, is how do we make sure that we're sourcing projects and delivering on the needs of a community rather than just forcing something down somebody's throats. So our goal is really to empower. And so we're looking to bring somebody in to do this and focus primarily on the environmental side of the house. And then the final position on here is one that was approved midway through the year by the board. We have not filled yet, but we're currently trying to. We have some applicants that are currently under review for marketing on battery storage. In terms of we have a couple of open positions for employees that are departing. And the first is another senior accountant, Irene Turker, who's been with us for time immemorial, as far as I'm concerned, is opting to retire. And so we're going to need to fill her position. Mike Yu, who I'm sure some of you have seen his presentations over the years, he led much of our efforts with regard to our Shrek securitizations, has moved on from the organization. Great opportunity for Mike, and the Nature Conservancy really will benefit by him joining their team. But we're going to need to fill him, and we're proposing to fill his position with two roles. One being somebody to kind of fill the role that he unofficially did on the team in terms of being kind of like the lead underwriter for most of our deals, and then another role in terms of looking at all the structuring that Mike was doing. So kind of filling his shoes on things like the Shrek and other investments. And then we have a couple of positions that are coming off just due to staff transitions. So this past year, Ed Kranitz transitioned from the RSIP team over to manage the battery storage team. Emma Saavedra similarly moved from RSIP over to battery storage. Alicia DeMaio, who was a member of our RSIP team, left the organization to pursue an advanced degree. And Louise Della Pesca left the organization. She'd been with us full time and moved to a consulting capacity. So those positions are not being filled at this point, and we're not including them in the staffing plan. So overall, we're looking at an addition of 3 headcount year on year, or 3.77 headcount year on year if you're going to be precise. I now want to walk through what we're talking about in terms of merit and COLA, because we're proposing a little bit of a different approach than we've taken in the past.
Eric, can I just interject for 1 minute? Just could you give Mike, you and the woman that's retiring our thanks for their work for the Green Bank?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
So with regards to merit and COLA, for the past 7 years or so, the Green Bank has been a merit-only organization. So if employees were to receive increases, those needed to be earned by meeting or exceeding goals through as part of this merit pool. After speaking with our compensation consultants, our external HR consultant, looking at what other quasis in the state are doing, as well as reading every single piece of news which seems to talk about inflation these days, we recognized that we needed to do something beyond just the merit pool. And so we're proposing a 5% cost of living allowance increase that would be effective July 1st. In addition to that, we're proposing a 4% merit pool that is based off of performance, and employees would be awarded a percentage increase based off of their performance in the review process. We're sticking with the same process this year that we've had in place for a while. And so we would look to do that after that review process is completed later this summer. This is in line, as I mentioned, with what our compensation consultants and the Society for Human Resource Management surveys have seen from the private sector, which are generally seeing about a 5 to 7% increase in budgets for compensation, just due to cost of living. In terms of what the state's doing, I know that they awarded a COLA to non-union employees that was retroactive back to January 1st. And there's another annual increase that becomes effective, I believe it becomes effective July 1st, or maybe that was August 1st, retroactive to July 1st, as well as some lump sum payments. So I feel like we are being conservative relative to what the state is doing. And the state's treatment for non-union employees is close to in line with what they are doing for union employees. Any questions on that?
I had a question. If you were to take off the like the high end, you know, the officers, what's the average salary?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. Can I follow up with you offline on that, John?
Yeah, sure. You know, the next meeting or whatever. I'm just curious. I mean, I think the plan is a good plan. I really just have never really thought about, okay, what are people making there?
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things. I looked at it. I looked at it sometime in the past 2 years, just out of my own curiosity. So I have a number in my head, but before I commit to that number, let me look at it and then realize how out of date I was. So,
It's at least $15 an hour, right?
yes, we're paying. We are certainly paying a living wage.
All right, good, thanks.
I think, yeah. I'll make sure that I mention that at the next meeting. Are there other questions or concerns? Okay.
Hey, Eric, it's Jane. Deanna's going to look to get us those numbers in a few minutes, okay?
Okay. I have the spreadsheet up on my computer. I just don't want to flip to it and project everybody's salaries into the recorded meeting. So,
All right, thanks.
try to maintain some privacy, but thank you. So with that, I'll transition from the staffing plan over to the individual expense budgets, if that's okay. So I'm going to start with the incentive programs. And I mean, you all got the 20 worksheets from Jane and I. And so what I've done here is I'm just trying to highlight a couple specific things that I think are the message that I want people to get from it, which aren't necessarily that clear from those worksheets. So I'll walk through these, but if there are other things that I'm skipping over or other questions, please feel free to stop me and I'll throw the budget workbooks up here and we can talk at it that way. So I'll start with the RSIP. Expenses are pretty much reflective that we're now in the wind down phase. That we're making sure that our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed from the customer acquisition, that we have everything that we need from an audit perspective, from a legal perspective. We know we have one final securitization coming, and so we know, hey, we need to make sure that all those systems that we didn't securitize the last time because we still were waiting on X piece of paperwork, that we get that piece of paperwork. So that's really where the focus is. We don't have big pushes for market education or to get people to go solar because we don't have, there's not room in them for not room for them in the program anymore. That's what the tariff is there for. So we've budgeted in this for the continued replacement of 3G meters. So we've got to ensure the Shrek production. So there's the move from 3G to 4G. We have a focus on asset management. We're looking for cost savings and efficiencies. And I'll talk about this at the same time as asset management. I mean, we spend a lot of money on monitoring the systems, and we have to do that. We have to know how much our systems are performing so that we can create the recs, so that there's an actual process of saying system number 1, 2, 3 generated this amount. We're going to aggregate that up. We're going to go to NEPOOL, who is part of the ISO, the independent system operator. We're going to create recs. We're going to file all of this, and then we can go turn around and sell those recs. So we need to have a lot of stuff in place. But that said, having the infrastructure in place to monitor these systems doesn't come cheap. That said, we're looking at a couple of opportunities that might allow us to do things, to have that same level of connectivity to create the recs and monitor it, but also to be proactive and say, hey, that system number 1, 2, 3 is underproducing for the week. Is this due to rain, or is this due to one of the panels being offline? So we're exploring a couple of options here. We have some money budgeted to at least explore what would be a much lower cost, long-term way to manage these systems, I'll say. The solar monitoring space right now, there's basically one player in it. And we don't have, there aren't options to choose from. So we're looking at other ways that we can maybe create our own options, I'll say. Battery storage. We're continuing with the customer acquisition phase for our energy storage solutions program. All of our expenses are in line with the budgets that were produced for Pura as part of the BCAs, the benefit cost assessments. So we're staying close. We're staying true to what we said we would do. And now our focus is just getting those customers in. And finally, on Smarty, our budget is pretty much flat year on year. We have an intent to expand the measures into environmental infrastructure. That'll be going to the deployment committee at some point in the new fiscal year. I know we've talked about it. There's still a lot to be defined there. So we have some budget to help with that, but I mean, we don't have any huge new campaigns planned. We don't have any new huge product tweaks there. We're really trying to re-engage with our contractor base for that program and kind of figure out what do they need from us in terms of support to do more loans. So any questions on the incentive program's expenses? All right, with that, the actual incentives. So how much are we going to give away? We're looking at overall a decrease year on year. So we're going to go from about 18 million to about 17 million. And I think we think that the split on this between the PBIs, so the performance-based incentives for the RSIP, and the expected performance-based buy downs, the EPBVs, we might be a little off there. We're just in the process of doing the last cleanups. This hopefully will be the last year where we're doing those EPBVs. I'm hopeful for that because it sucks a lot of time from staff to process them. But the other incentives that you see in here are for battery storage. That's we're expecting there to be a bunch of residential systems starting to come online. We're seeing those approved. We have a handful that have been approved thus far. I don't think any of them are actually dispatching yet, but we do expect them to be online and us to be paying incentives as part of that approval the next year. Commercial, we don't have anything budgeted this year for those systems. And that is because the time that it takes to actually get the systems up and running and us to actually pay that incentive. So I think you all would have heard at this point that, you know, the first block, the initial block of incentives for commercial systems is already full. We haven't paid any incentive on those because the systems haven't been approved. They haven't been given permission to energize, they've been built. So it takes a long time from us saying, yeah, go for it, to actually paying that incentive. And we aren't actually expecting any of that to happen within this next fiscal year. So that's why that is budgeted at 0. We have a small number in here for other grants. And then we are continuing with our the existing level of support for sustainable CT that we've kept up in the past. And finally, we have $60,000 for some other grants that we might need to do to make specific projects work with battery storage. And that's really, that's not, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it in terms of make specific projects work. It's more specific to open up specific marketing channels. So some of that is with Operation Fuel. It's how do we work with them to engage the low to moderate income population about battery storage that would be beneficial to them. So it really opens up that as a marketing channel. Similarly, with the Clean Energy Group, who are targeting affordable multifamily, this is to really facilitate some projects in that space. So, any questions here?
Do
Eric,
we have, oh,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
break in with an answer to your question, John.
Hi.
The per salary or the dollars per hour per employee averages $44.44, excluding the senior staff.
That seems a fair wage for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for looking that up. I had a question in terms of, do we have a program yet on heat pumps?
So Smart E covers heat pumps, and we're about to, I think the messaging has gone out now, so I'm free to say it. We're launching a special offer that I believe will begin July 1st. That one of the targeted technologies is heat pumps. It's going to focus heat pumps, battery storage, and I think there was a third. I'm blanking on it, but I think that most of the uptake that we'll see with that, I expect there to be a large uptake in terms of heat pumps there.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to move on to the financing programs. So CPACE year on year, our expenses are flat. In there, there's some efficiency savings from, or some savings from some efficiency gains, and that's basically from bringing in-house the billing for CPACE. So I won't bore you guys with the details, but we used to outsource some of the billing to the municipalities. We've now consolidated that and done that in-house, and that has led to a bunch of savings with some of our third-party providers. In terms of the PPA and roof lease, we have some big expenses here, as we do every year, for operations and maintenance. Those are reflected at the Green Bank level. We always budget them here. We end up then paying them out at the PPAs, and we probably should do a little bit of a better job of making, well, I'd love to be doing the budgets at the actual PPA fund level, but it's, we always do this at the Green Bank level. And as I mentioned previously, our investment in operations and maintenance is paying off. We are achieving that estimated production. For the most part, I mean, we look at the portfolio and looking at expected production versus actuals, and we are achieving that. In terms of multifamily, our expenses are to support the projects that are currently in the pipeline in terms of term lending, and we're the rest of the budget is pretty much there to support the acquisition of new PPA projects. Any questions on this? All right. So moving on to environmental infrastructure, we have 2 headcount budgeted for the full year. So this is different than last year, where I think we had 1 headcount for part of the year and not much else, a small amount of R&D budget. This year we have a much larger R&D budget and some program admin money to basically help get these offerings off the ground. We have, Brian's done his listening tour. We have some directional ideas coming out of the strategic retreat. And so now it's how do we translate that into actual either programmatic offerings, or how do we get to actual projects? So I think there's directionally we know where we're headed, and I think this money is there to help the staff when we get staffed up, help them actually achieve that. It's not, I don't think it's as detailed as it would be for something that we're already up and running, but this is something new, and I don't think that would really be a fair expectation in this case. In terms of the clean energy finance, so Bert's team, year on year, there's an increase in expenses, and the primary driver of that is just due to staffing. We're adding a position here that we didn't have previously, so we're replacing Mike Yu with 2 people, and that's really the primary driver here. Questions or concerns? Moving on to marketing. So last year I mentioned at this meeting, we were making a strategic shift from being more product centric media approach to a brand level media strategy. We're continuing with that. And we're really trying to do that across the board. We're trying to be more inclusive as an organization in terms of our outreach. And that's both in terms of who we're reaching out to, but also reaching out as the Green Bank as opposed to as a product. We have our consolidated contractor outreach strategy. It's taken a while to kind of get that in gear. We had a great event, I guess that was last week, with a broad range of our contractors. We're making sure that we're really trying to be seen as their partner as opposed to just some financier or some quasi-governmental organization that happens to be overseeing an incentive that they're a part of. And I think we're starting to see that, and I think that should start paying dividends in terms of additional projects coming our way. We're looking to do similar things, as I mentioned, with this additional position on the community outreach side, making sure that we're engaging with various communities and bringing them along with us, and then hopefully them bringing us along with them. And in terms of the marketing budget, there's an increase in paid media overall, and that's driven primarily due to energy storage solutions and the approach that we've taken with this. We've done a fair amount of web-based marketing and out of home, and we're going to continue to do that. I think we're going to increase that as the program continues to ramp up. We have had a decrease in production, and production is our way of saying creating actual marketing assets. So things like the website, we've spent a bunch of money this past year on our website and creating a new one, which should be rolling out in the first quarter of the next fiscal year. I'm really excited by what I've seen. I think it cleans things up and makes interacting with the Green Bank a lot more straightforward. We've also developed a lot of assets this past year in terms of energy storage solutions. We've had a couple of videos. We have one that I'm excited to see, an animated video explaining exactly how batteries work. We're trying to simplify things. So basically, we realized we didn't need as much, and overall, you'll see a net drop year on year in terms of marketing spend. In terms of research and development, and I've referred to some of this in the environmental infrastructure budget, but we have a $200,000 budget here, and these are kind of placeholders. Normally, we come to this with some projects that we've been working on year to year that are carrying over, or we have something lined up that we're gonna just go ahead and do. Right now, we know that we're going to need something in terms of environmental infrastructure, but we don't know what that is. And then similarly, on the clean energy side, we have this as a number. It's kind of a placeholder. We know that there a variety of things that are going to come up. We're now involved in this Clean Hydrogen Hub, the Hydrogen Commission that was just launched as part of the recent legislative session. So there could be something coming out of that. There's some other work that we're doing in terms of fuel cells. So we don't know what the need will be, but this is basically there to support whatever that is. Any questions or concerns?
I wondered, I just raised this as a possibility. I know that heat pumps still are an inordinate cost compared to some other things. I'm wondering, in terms of research and development, if we could take some money and have CCAT or have UConn or somebody really take that technology and the process of installing it apart and figure out how to do it all more cheaply.
We typically haven't spent our research and development money on that type of technology investigation, but it's something to kick around.
I mean, it's really such a critical it's a critical piece. If we could really get the price down, it would really be a game changer.
Okay, let us take it back and let us see who we can engage with on it.
And the other thing on marketing is, do we have anybody pushing a free marketing, like stories in national, local and trade publications and other stuff like that?
I'm not sure I follow. So
how do we get? This is what I'd like. I'd like to buy the Sunday New York Times, take out the magazine, and there's a picture of Brian Garcia on the cover.
So earned media, I think, is what you're talking about. So get somebody to write stories about the work that we're doing.
Well, I mean, it's actually normally kind of considered free media, that you interest the media in your story, and then they come and ask you about it and they tell it.
Yes. So we have a relationship with a PR firm who we've done this several times to varying degrees of success. We haven't made the New York Times Magazine section yet, but we got to save that for something big. But we have done this. So I know we had some things around CPACE new construction. We were really trying to make sure that we were looking for ways to get in front of property developers or building owners.
Right.
And so it was much more targeted at those publications, but we did work with our PR firm on that. There were some other stories that I know that we did and that we got out there. I'm just blanking on examples, but I know that the CPACE new construction one is the most recent one that I can think of. But
anyway, I think that the Green Bank is such a great story. I'd love to see it. I'd like to see it, told.
I do too, and I would love to. I'd love for everybody to be telling it. I think that earned media, or that the free media it is part of our strategy, and it is one of the tools in our toolbox, and it is part of that marketing budget in terms of having somebody to help us get those stories in front of the people that might be interested in telling them that just don't know it yet.
Cool.
So, all right. So moving on to other operating expenses. This is all the fun stuff. So year on year, we have about $150,000 increase and this is primarily driven by inflation, primarily on the IT side. Um, these numbers are probably going to shift a little bit between now and the final budget. We're still waiting on some pricing and a couple of things, so these will get tweaked. I think overall, the net bottom number that you're seeing is probably going to be pretty close to where it is now. That I'm sure there are a couple things that we're shooting too high for and a couple things we're coming in too low, but I'd be shocked if it were very different than what we have now. But just for transparency's sake, I'll let you know that those will probably change between now and the final. Overall rent, we have our increase that's built into the overall lease. Our communications is coming down just due to some over budgeting that had happened in the past. And everything else that's here is basically increasing in line with inflation. And then finally, the last item that I have for you today is with capital expenses. We have a decrease year on year in terms of CapEx. What we're looking to spend is basically additional or new laptops in line with what we do every year. And then we have yet to build out our conference room technology-wise in our Stanford office that we moved to a little over a year ago. And so we now need to do that with people coming back into the office. We just kind of held off. And now making sure that we have that connectivity for Stanford that we have for the office in Hartford. Yeah, that's something that we want to make sure that we have. And so we'll look to do that hopefully in July. So, and the other big decrease is because we don't have a new office to build out. So that's the big driver of the decreased expenses here. All right. Any other questions or concerns on this? This is, I think, the last item in the budget that I had that I wanted to highlight. And I realize I've gone through this more quickly than I thought I was going to be able to. But
Well, it's evidence of a tremendous amount of work by a number of people, and it all, to me, it all rings true and is reasonable, and certainly indicates that the bank is continuing to operate responsibly, but at the same time, you know, basically look for ways to get projects done. And as we were talking the other day, Eric, to the bottom line is cut carbon. And so I really thank you and Jane and everybody who worked on this for their efforts. And any of the committee members have any other comments or questions or anything on this?
No questions. I have to second what John said. Really good job as usual from all staff. Thank you.
thank you.
So Eric, unless there's more business, is it appropriate to adjourn at this point or what?
Sure. I will give the committee a heads up that we will likely mail the next portion of the budget on Thursday or Friday of this week. So you'll have it in time for next week's meeting. And I look forward to discussing everything with you guys at that point.
Well, thank you, Eric. You did a good job in explaining this stuff, which I appreciate. Is there a motion to adjourn
So move.
and a second?
I'll
All
second.
right. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, there you are. You're free for the afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you,
We'll
Eric.
see you.
John.
Take care, folks.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.